everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Caitlin and I am an artist. I use a ton of different mediums, but today I'm going to focus on watercolor, and today is going to be a paint along, so I'm going to give you step-by-step details in real time of exactly what I'm doing in order to already drew, in order to paint this deer. So the reference photo is right from the internet. Nothing too exciting. Well, I'm excited. I like deer, but anyways, that is the reference photo. Got it online for free. So here we go. Now I drew this using a grid method. So a grid method is actually when you draw out a grid, and then what I do is I put a grid onto my photo, and then just box by box I go and I draw the whole deer. And the grid really makes sure that your proportions are perfect and the deer is going to look exactly like how it looks on your reference photo. And then you can just go ahead and take off the grid, and now you've got your thing to work with. And then what you have to do is you need to then go in and erase all of the lines of your grid. Now, artists use a ton of different methods, and there are projectors out there where you don't have to do the grid method anymore. For some reason, I just like to. And sometimes people are like, how do you possibly get the grid off of these tiny little areas? And my secret weapon for that is this. It's a little chargeable. It uses a little charger, and it's just an eraser, and it's this teeny tiny little thing, and it goes and can get all of your, really, well, I don't want to erase any lines here. I guess I can erase this one. It's just all your little lines. All right, so that's how I do my drawing. And I also do my actual drawing with a very fine point. It's 0.3, and it's a mechanical pencil, and it's this, okay? And I use H or HB in my final drawings. And there we go. This is called a Pilot Air Blanc, okay? And it's 0.3, very small, very tiny, perfect. And I would suggest doing your grid in something softer, like a 2B or a 4B lead grade, only because that will probably come off a little bit easier when you go and erase. All right, on to the painting. Now, I am using, this is Strathmore Watercolor. It's their Best Series 400, okay? And I just got this at Michael's. I'm here in the United States, so Michael's is a big box store that sells all sorts of craft supplies. And the other thing that I did is I made a small palette of colors, and I do not plan on using anything more than these colors, all right? And I chose these colors very specifically. It took me a long time to come up with some of the things that I'm going to mix. So I did this just a few minutes ago. I am going to be putting this guy on like a splashy background, and he is going to, it's going to be green, and that color is made up of cobalt and yellow ochre. By the way, these are Winsor and Newton cotman watercolor pans. There are a couple, I believe, that are from schpirrer and farben, which I've talked about in another video, but they're available on Amazon. I really like them, and they're similar in quality, I think, to the cotman brand. This purple color I'm going to be using for some shadows on the actual deer, and that was Viridian and Rose Madder. And then, so some of his other features will be this dark gray, and that's lamp black and Payne's gray. And then he's got some highlights of brown fur, or like really light brown areas. And this is burnt sienna plus Chinese white. So those are the colors. And here they are, and that's how I came up with this palette. I think it's really important to have a game plan for your colors and a limited palette, because I will tell you, if you can pare down to just a few colors, then it will make your life so much easier, but it will also make your picture so much more beautiful. If you just go and choose a color of what you see, by the end of the picture, it's going to look like a children's coloring book. And I know that sounds crazy, but I was doing that for a really long time. And once I limited a palette, you know, for each picture and only used 5 or 6 colors, it was a very cohesive and really beautiful painting. Here, you know, I do own a lot of colors. Here's a palette that I have, for example. And so I just pick from these in order to make each painting, okay? If you just have this in front of you, what tends to happen if you're not careful is you'll just go from color to color, and your painting will have as many colors as this, and it will like really look crazy. So it's just a suggestion, but that's how I make paintings to be a little bit more cohesive. All right, on to the painting. So I'm going to be using several different brushes, okay? And I'm going to be using my water with my little puck in there. It's supposed to suction onto the bottom, but I didn't do that today, but regardless. And I have my cloth so I can wipe off my brush between colors. And I also have my can of soda. It's soda water, gotta keep trim. But it has caffeine in it, and this is gonna be a long night. I actually don't think it's going to be. It is going to be pretty simple because I am not putting a ton of detail in this. It's going to be a little loose. It's going to be washy. It's going to be very pretty. I'm excited. I've always wanted to do a deer. So this video is a request from a viewer who wanted to see a paint along. So here we go. Grab your brushes, grab your deer that I know you just whipped up drawing while I spoke, and get your brush, get your drink, get your wine, get your whatever, and let's paint. So the one thing to keep in mind if you're new to watercolor is you have to be careful while you let things dry. You don't want to be painting the thing right next to it. So if I do the background, I don't want to go ahead and start in with the antlers because you got to let it dry. Got to let the background dry before I do the antlers, okay? Because once you start putting too much water onto the paper, things will start getting muddy and blending together. So I always like to start with the eyes. And this little guy is a guy because there's antlers. So he has almost black eyes. However, I'm careful not to, well, in a normal picture, I leave lamp black for just the pupil because that's like always the most black thing on the painting. However, I'm really looking at this deer and he has almost brown. So I'm going to, because I'm sticking with this palette only, I am going to use lamp black, and I'm also going to be using some burnt sienna in order to just give them a touch of brown. Okay, so I am just mixing that up here. And my lamp black's here. I love lamp black. And that looks pretty dark. I'm gonna start here. And I'm actually seeing now that I didn't, not that I've made any mistakes so far, but his, the black or the, I don't know, it's not really a pupil or an iris, but his eye is circular. And I didn't really draw it in, so I'm gonna have to paint it in. And already I can see that I'm gonna really have to add more black here for it to not look crazy ridiculous. So I'm gonna just go ahead right in with the black. And what I just the first little layer is still a little bit of wet. And so this black is just kind of filling right in. And I'm going to do the top. Now I'm leaving a big section of white here in the middle, and that's for the reflection. Usually I'll do that first and it will be a really light color, but I didn't do that. But it's okay. I'm gonna wait until that dries. Well, actually I'm not. I'll just go in with a little bit of water. Okay. And I just very lightly kind of began filling in that reflective area. Okay. All right, so I'm gonna let that dry before I add any more, and then I'll just go right into the other eye. And the other eye is kind of a lot bigger. In my drawing, it makes it look really big, so I might amend that a little bit because I don't want it to look crazy weird. And we're just going really carefully. And he doesn't have as much of a reflective area here, so I don't have to be too careful. As long as I leave 2 little spots, that's all the reflection he's got over here. But let's see how that looks now. That looks pretty good, but now this eye is a lot darker than this one. So I am gonna add some black here. And that doesn't look too bad. Now before this one dries, I'm just gonna take a clean brush, but still wet. So I dipped it in the water, wiped it off a little bit, and I'm just gonna soak up some of the water there. I'm sorry, some of the color, just to give it more of a reflective quality, even though it doesn't actually have that in the picture, but that gives it more life. And I'm gonna do a little bit of that over here too. Okay. So when you just put a black eye on, it just makes the painting look a little bit dead. So just be careful of that. You want to give some life, and the life is usually found in the eyes. So something to keep in mind. All right, on we go. Now I might go back to the eyes in a few minutes, but I'm going to use this time while I let those dry to do the background. So for the background, I'm gonna do a big mop brush. And I bought these on Amazon. Everything of mine is on Amazon. By the way, I don't get paid to endorse anything, so this is all my own opinion. But I like this brush, and it's made out of squirrel hair. And before I get a bunch of people telling me how cruel I am using squirrel hair, I was thinking about it, and at first I only wanted to use synthetic brushes because I do love animals, and I felt really bad about, you know, being the reason why these animals were dying, until I learned that the squirrel is actually harvested for a different purpose. It's harvested for things like meat and maybe bones, organs. I mean, I don't really know what they're used for, but the animal was already dead for another purpose. And so the people that make the meat or whatever just then give the carcass to the brush company. And so the animal was dead. We're actually, you know, honoring the animal, I think, by using their hair for such a beautiful purpose. So if that helps anyone sleep at night, then I've done my job, because I really believe that that's, you know, we're not doing anything cruel as painters by using these, you know, animal hair brushes. The hair is already eaten, and it's nice that we're using what's left for such a beautiful purpose. Anyways, that's my opinion. Somebody will yell at me, but I'm not a vegetarian. And so what I'm doing now is I mixed up a bunch of this green. And one of the really cool things about watercolor is these fun effects you can get that are kind of loose and splashy. And we want to take advantage of that because it's so unique to watercolor. You know, you can't really get that look in acrylics or pastel so much, or oil paintings. I mean, a little bit, yeah, but not like watercolor. Watercolor is unique. And I'm just being really careful not to get the deer. And I have to mix up so much of this color that it's coming out a little bit different each time. So sometimes it's a little bit more on the cobalt blue side. Sometimes it's a little bit more on the yellow ochre side, but that variation is kind of cool too. And I like this mop brush because you can pick up a lot of water and you can have this effect really well. What I'm going to also do is add some splashes. And I just put a lot of water and a lot of paint on my brush, and then I gently tap. The bigger the water, or I'm sorry, the more water you put on, the bigger the little splash bubbles you end up making. And I think that's pretty cool. So I'm not actually going to do the whole outside of the deer. I'm going to just do some of it. I know this is a little bit of a boring part, but this is a really fun part, I think. It's hard to mess up, so it feels less scary to do. And it's just fun. You can't go wrong with these decorative little splashes. Okay. And that looks really pretty. I'm going to just do a little bit more on this side and call it a day. And so, apologize, my hand is in the way, but I'm just repeating what I did there on this side. And I'll add some more splashies. Whoops. So what you got to do is you got to be careful of the splashes because they can get onto things like the antlers. That's actually fine though. I'm not going to worry about it, but just something to keep in mind. Now you might be wondering, how does she know that cobalt blue and yellow ochre are going to make such a pretty color? That sounds like a really obscure combination. Well, it is, but I'll tell you another little fascinating secret of mine in just a minute. When I first started doing watercolor, I bought a set of 48. I bought the whole kind of kit and caboodle cotman set. And then what I'm going to do here, I'm going to put a lot of water on, and I'm going to let this baby run. And if you just kind of you can have these really cool runny effects. If you want to. See how I'm doing that? Okay. Fun. A little different. Make it artistic. All right. So we are going to let that dry for a few minutes. And while I do, I'm going to share with you something that it took hours and hours to do, but it has been invaluable to me. I made these grids where I took all of my 48 colors and I mixed them up. I crossed each one. And so it came out to be these huge charts. I know that's obnoxious. It took like a week to make, but I did it before I started painting at all. And now I just keep these with me all the time. And if I want a particular color, like, when I was thinking about the background and what I wanted this deer to actually look like, I just looked at these color charts and I said, okay, so this is the color I really like. So that's burnt sienna plus indigo, boom. And then I would, look at the hair and be like, well, what would complement that really well? Well, a brown, something in the brown family. Okay, this one. So Van Dyke brown and sepia, okay? So I know that's a lot of work. And I will say, if I could start over, I would not have done such an obnoxious, I wouldn't have bought such an obnoxious amount of watercolors because that ended up being crazy. And I will say I don't use all of them. And there are a lot of colors that kind of seem like repeats to me. And, I can absolutely come up with similar color combinations with less pans, if that makes sense. So I wouldn't recommend starting out with every single color. I would get a limited palette and then see what those make and then go from there. But again, I didn't know at the time. So this still needs some time to dry, but I really like how it's coming out. And there's variations with blues and greens and yellows. There are some blooms, which I don't actually like blooms in my painting as far as, on the animal. But if it's on the splashy background, it looks pretty cool. I'm going to go in now and touch up my eye. And so I'm going back to this smaller brush. And I'm gonna go right in with the lamp black. And I'm just going to add some shape to this deer's eye. And I don't need to go crazy. Okay. All right, and again, this is not going to be an incredibly detailed deer, so I don't need to spend too much time going absolutely crazy. See the spot that I have that got on the actual antler? I can delete this part of the spot by just going over it with a clean, dry brush. And now it's not on my antler anymore. And the reason why I was able to do that is because it was still wet. This has dried and it's a little late. But the reason why I didn't care is this is going to be a very dark color. So now while this is still drying, and it's pretty much dry to the touch, but I'm going to go and work on the nose. And the nose is, the majority of it is a light Payne's gray. And so I'm going to color the whole color. I'm going to paint, because I am painting, the whole thing the lightest color, which is Payne's gray. And while it is still wet, I am going to drop in some black to some areas. So, and just let it spread. Okay. And I'm going to do the same thing up here. Just let it spread. Then in areas that it needs to be really dark, I'll just add a little bit more lamp black. And I'll do the same thing down here. And these shouldn't connect because it is kind of light over here, so it's working out really well so far. And so that looks pretty good. And the side is actually very dark, but if I go in and start adding black here, it might leak into the interior of the nose, which I don't want. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something that's not touching that, and that's going to be my burnt sienna with my Chinese white, and that just makes a really light wash, which I am going to do on the side of this guy's like nose, right on his muzzle. Okay, and that looks good. Now, since I'm using that color, I'm going to drop it in a couple of other areas on him. Mix up a little bit more. Now he's got, this is dark, but he's got some areas here. And you don't have to be perfect because nobody knows this deer. It's not a pet portrait. Pet portraits, you have to be careful because the person who is paying for the portrait knows what their dog looks like. And so in that case, you have to be very careful when you start dropping in colors. But this deer, we can just have fun with. And he's not a lot brown, but just a little bit. And just do this, do that. All right, that's enough. All right, so again, I need to finish up the eyes, but it's still drying. So I'm gonna go to the antlers now. Now, the antlers are actually very much white, but I don't wanna leave it white. So I'm gonna take Payne's Gray and mix it with Chinese white and almost make like a very light wash. And I'm going to put it on my antlers. Let's see if you guys can see what I'm doing here. Yeah. All right, I'm just going to streak it in to my antlers, and all that is doing is I am causing the base to not be white. I just don't like leaving white on the paper. I'm sure I don't say that's a hard and fast rule, but in this particular picture, I just think that I don't want to leave any white, and that's fine. So I'm going to start by putting the whole, or making the whole antler this gray. Now, what I've already seen that I've forgotten to do is this should be that cool green color and this should be that cool green color. So I can go ahead and do that once this antler dries. So I'm just gonna make the whole antler this kind of light gray. It's very light gray. And I'm gonna do the same thing to the other antler. It's almost like I'm not really doing anything. I'm just creating a very light base, just so I don't have any white on this guy. So that was Payne's Gray and Chinese white and a lot of water. All right, I'm gonna go and do it over here. And now the green has dried, so I can I'm not being super careful. I can, color all over it. I shouldn't say color, I hang out with my little kids too much. I can paint on that and it's not going to, be seeping into my antler. So that's one of the nice things about watercolor too, is you don't have to worry about smudging it or anything like that. It's not like an oil painting that takes forever to dry. And you can't smudge it. Okay, so again, I have to remember I've got to go in with that really pretty green here. So I'm going to leave the antlers alone. And I am going to go back to my nose. So if you'll notice, I'm just kind of going back and forth between things, letting pieces dry. And you don't have to do it that way. I mean, you can go and have a cup of coffee or watch TV or leave your painting and let things dry. But it's more efficient if you just kind of swap between areas. But be careful. There is, a real need sometimes to finish something, and not everyone has the patience, and you end up going in, and what happens sometimes, unfortunately, is you do make mistakes. Sometimes there's a certain amount of patience that just is a little bit required here. So I'm just dropping in some very dark lamp black in order to define some areas that need defining. Again, we're not going for realistic here, so it doesn't have to be perfect, but we do want it to look like a deer. And so we are making that happen. Okay, so I'm gonna let that dry before I go back to it. And now I can pick something else to do. And I've just decided I'm gonna go in to right under this. And he's got this kind of light fur. Well, it's kind of a dark fur, actually. But I'm just gonna just very lightly drop it in. And I'm not going in a straight line, I'm just making little dots and kind of connecting them. And that's how I'm making this kind of mouth that he has. And so I'm gonna leave that alone for a little bit. What I should have, not sure that I like that, so I'm gonna, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna blend it all together because I didn't really like how it came out. And then I'm gonna take my clean dry paintbrush, or my clean wet paintbrush, and just kind of subtract. Okay. And so if you don't like how something's coming out, that's a really good trick to know. There we go. That looks a little bit better, but I am going to define this line a little bit once it dries. All right, so now I can go back to the eyes. And so the reason why I'm spending so much time on the eyes is, if you notice, I don't really like how this black puddle has kind of formed. And so I'm going in with the black. And now I'm going to just go all the way over and get all the black in that I need to. And then I'm gonna call this eye a day. And this one actually looks pretty good. I'm gonna take my black and really define as if he has an eyeliner or something. And that just gives it a little bit more shape. And I'm also going to clean my brush, dry it, and just kind of pull some of this black over into the white. Okay? And that looks a little bit more natural. And now I feel good about the eyes, and I'm gonna leave them alone. So I'm gonna go back to my antlers while this mouth is drying. And the antlers are actually a dark gray. So that's gonna be my lamp black and my Payne's gray. And I'm just going to start. I'm gonna just start here. So you gotta be careful because you do want to follow the line perfectly upward. Okay. And I just kind of did a little sweep. Now what happened is the way my brush kind of hit the paper, it left some of this tooth kind of whitish, and so it didn't make a solid stripe. That actually looks spot on to the way the picture looks. And the reason why the paint wasn't able to penetrate that tooth is because it wasn't super wet paint, okay? It was a little on the dry side. So that actually worked out to my advantage. And I'm going to do a similar thing here. Okay, now I've made this a little bit too dark. It's actually whitish at the top. So I'm going to take my damp, clean brush and I'm just going to go over that a little bit. You don't want it to be dry, it's got to be damp. And I'm going to try to subtract some of this that I just did, but it's not really working out. It's definitely lightening up the color, but that would be really hard to scrub out to completely white again. But it's really not a big deal. Now there are ways you can fix that besides what I'm doing. Because this is working, I'm getting more and more of the Payne's gray up each time. And this is probably closer to what the picture looks like, so I'm happy with that. But the other thing that I would do if I ever felt like I needed to really get a lot of that up, and I couldn't, what I would do is I would just what am I thinking? I would just take a white, either gouache, which is an opaque watercolor, and kind of paint over it, or I would take one of the mini white either colored pencils I have, or I have a white pastel, and I could just kind of go over that with white a little bit. So I'm doing the same thing on this antler as I had to do farther up, and that's just kind of delete some of the white, I'm sorry, some of the gray and make it white. I won't be able to make it perfectly white, but you know, that's okay. And again, nobody knows this deer, this poor deer that I'm messing up. No, it's actually coming out fine. Alrighty, so I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to just be careful this time to not put Payne's gray where it doesn't belong. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to shake that. And now the next antler over here, I'm going to do the same thing, but that has a touch of brown in it. So I'm gonna try to let that reflect in the antler. And so I was able to achieve that kind of striped look a little bit by not completely saturating my paintbrush with watery paint, but more paint than water, if you will. See, I just was able to do it again. And that creates more of a natural striation, if you will, of the antler. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And I'm gonna add a little bit more black over here, just because I don't want one antler to look, you know, brown and one to look black. So I'm adding some black over here, and now, what the heck, I'll add some brown over here, just to balance it out. That looks fine. Okay, so now everything looks pretty dry here. And what I'm gonna now do is I'm gonna take up this purple that I mixed up, and I'm gonna just very lightly touch in some of the nose with this purple. I'm gonna make a little more of it. So that was Rose Madder plus Viridian, which green and red should make a brown, but in this case it makes a little bit of a purple, like a dark purple. And I'm just kind of using it to create a different look. And I'm gonna just pepper it in a couple of these areas to give it a different look. And I'm gonna actually do the same thing on the fur with that same color combination. So I'm just using that purple as like a little bit of a shadow. Okay, so that looks good. That looks good. All right, now I said I wanted to go back to this part and make a little bit of a actual mouth. So I'm going to do that right now. And I'm just creating a little bit of a stripe. Now it looks like it's smiling. You got to be careful. You want this to be subtle. And that doesn't look very subtle. It actually, now that I'm looking at the picture, it's not very subtle in the picture. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop some of this color down, and all I have on my paintbrush is a little bit of water, and I'm just going to bring it down so it's not so heavy, and I'll bring the color down a little bit. And we'll just put it right there. Make this kind of chin look. And now I'm going to just take some clean water, and I've gone and just messed up that whole thing. So when you add way too much water, then dry your brush off and try to absorb it. Okay. So that will look better once I start adding fur. Okay. So now for basically the dark parts. And this should go pretty quickly. So far I've been using, this is kind of a detailed brush. This is a number 2 Blick Scholastic white round. The next parts are these kind of larger areas. So I'm going to use a larger paintbrush just so I can not take all night. I'm going to go to a number 7 and we'll see what sort of magic I can make happen with this. So I'm going to wet it. Now, if I was really good, I would switch my water, but I'm not that good. And the rest of the colors are going to be very dark. Oh, but first let me go in and fix this part. So this was that pretty green background. I love these grayish green colors. They're so pretty. And then I'm going to do the same over here. Excellent. Good. I'll take a drink. Now the other thing I need to do with my detail brush is I want to make a little bit of a line, a dark brown line around his eyes, because that is what is in the photo. So it's almost like a pretty eyeliner. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to do that with the next eye. Okay, that was good. All right, so onto this bigger brush. So I am going to do the ears, and inside of this, the ears are these grayish, brownish, whitish tufts, and I already have this grayish, brownish soup here, so I'm gonna just activate it a little bit, maybe add a little more gray. Okay, and what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get a lot of water, and I'm just gonna speckle the inside of the ears here where the hair would be. Okay, now I'm leaving some white because the hair is very white on the ears. So and again, this is a loose painting, so we don't have to be incredibly crazy. Just has to be, you know, we're just being loose. We're having fun. Loosen up, if you will. I'm gonna tell myself that all the time. I'm so rigid. That's my personality. It's not good. It's not good for watercolor. You gotta loosen up. So next I'm gonna stay away from the ears because I don't want to start messing up those pretty little ear tufts I just did. So I'm gonna go to the face, and I'm gonna do this kind of inside, and I'm gonna just wet it with water. And anywhere, I'm gonna just do that. Now I'm gonna use gray, and I'm also gonna use a little bit of that really pretty purple color. So that would be green, and that would be red. Okay, so now I've got this darkish grayish purple, and I'm gonna add it into that water sploosh I just made. Okay, that looks very pretty, and pretty is what we're going for. And this is actually pretty dark, so I'm gonna add a little bit of black, just a touch of black, to some of these outer areas. The problem is that I'm not really sure where they're gonna spread to. So we'll let the water decide, but they're really only on these kind of outermost areas. Okay, so we're gonna trust the water is gonna do that, but we don't always know. Okay. All right. Now stop that, because it's easy to overwork and then be super disappointed after. I do it all the time. All right, so I don't want to touch over here because that's too close to this wet part. I don't want to go to the ears yet because they're still wet. So I only have a couple of other options, and I am going to do this part of the face. And that is a very light grayish brown. So I'm gonna get some burnt sienna. I'm gonna get some Payne's gray. I get a little more burnt sienna. Good. And then I'm gonna get some white, and I'm gonna start a lot of water. I'm gonna just start washing it in. And then, yeah. I'm just adding some dark. This is, as most of my paintings do, this is starting to morph into something very different from the original, but that's fine. Now the part that I'm doing around the face is definitely on the lighter side. So it's so much on the lighter side, I need to lighten it a little bit. And how I just did that was I took some water, cleaned off my brush, and then I just kind of wiped off some of the paint before it really dried. Okay. It looks like he has like these really crazy big cheeks now, but it's gonna look better. All right, let's make this look better. I'm gonna go with the black. I'm gonna go with the brown. And it's time to really start putting some dark color down, because this is actually a pretty dark deer. And the darkness starts here and travels all the way down. Okay, but we can give ourselves permission to get loose here. And so I'm going to start going back at the top now that I've got some dark color mixed around here. I'm going to go and start applying it to the ears. Okay, now I'm using a pretty thick brush, so I've got to be on the careful side. Okay. Now with a pretty dry brush, I'm now going to just wash some of that in like this to create a hair-like effect. And I'm going to take my paint again and get into the tippity top of these ears. Okay. And that looks pretty good. And I'll take a dry brush again and just kind of splat, splat. Gave some hair-like effect there. And I'm gonna just pick up some of the water here, because these pretty ears that I had originally made have morphed a little bit into something. So I'm gonna just add a little bit of brown here. And that looks pretty good. And then I'm gonna add the same kind of detail over here. So I've got to do and then I'm going to do what I did last time and just dry off my brush and just kind of bring in the strokes to be a little hair-like. That didn't work out as well. And I think, so what I'll do is I'm just going to add a little bit of black to kind of a dry brush. And that pretty much does the job. Again, we're trying to be loose here. And then the next thing I need to do is focus on the forehead, and then that will kind of tie all of this together. So the forehead is very dark brown. And so I've already kind of made up this dark brown. And I'm gonna just dot it in. And I'm gonna add some more. And it's very dark here, right where the antlers attach to the head. So I'm going to try to show that by adding some Payne's Gray right to the base there. But as you can see, it's already starting to seep in a little bit, but that's okay. I'm going to add some more brown to this mixture and then just bring it down. There we go. And now the rest of this is very light, if not white. So I'm just gonna kind of bring color in that's already there and let it bleed around. Okay. And so really the only thing I have to worry about now is the body. However, I want to try to get rid of some of this stuff going on the chin because I don't really like how that came out. So I'm just adding a little bit of water to reactivate the watercolor, scrubbing it around a little bit, and then cleaning off my brush with the towel and then picking up the watercolor, okay? And that's actually creating a nice gradation here. Okay. And then with a brush with only paint, I'm just kind of redefining that chin, which is all I really wanted to do. And under that chin is a very dark brown. So I'm gonna just have fun with that a little bit. And there's some brown here. So I'm going to take the brown and then I'm going to add my green and my red to that in order to make a purplish brown. It's not coming out anything like what I'm trying to do though. All right, I'm gonna go with the green and the red. And okay, that's coming out a little bit better. This is but now it's kind of greenish. So I'm gonna add some red. And now it's too red. Now we'll add some green. And now it's too green. Ah! All right. Yeah, it was Viridian and Rose Madder that led to that really nice dark purple. All right, we're gonna just end it there with the purple. And maybe get a little darker. Okay, that's good. And I am going to just add it in to some areas that are really dark. Just gives a really nice, pretty effect, I think. Although it's not coming out as purpley as that looks a little bit better. And you always want to follow the direction of the hair. Which can be a little confusing because in the picture this goes down here, this goes down here, and then it kind of starts heading toward the butt there. All right, now I'm gonna just start putting in some of this brown. And again, I'm just getting loose. I'm having fun because that's what watercolor should be all about, people, is having fun, getting loose, make it your own, enjoy the process, especially if you're not somebody who is incredibly loose and you know you're more of a detail-oriented person, and you know you tend to follow the rules, and you know people like us, because I fall into that category, especially need watercolor to just kind of allow yourself to break the rules a little bit and to get messy. So what I'm gonna now do is I'm gonna take this brown and I'm gonna add some stripes, and I'll add the cool little drips, which are actually kind of hard to do. They're not always easy, truthfully. So anyways, we'll just kind of keep it like that. And I don't want all of this white. I mean, I kind of do actually now that I'm looking at it, but I'm gonna just kind of glaze over it with a lighter color. And I'm looking at it, and this is, you know, a little bit looser than what I tend to do, but loose is cool. And, you know, I have my other paintings tend to be very rigid, so this looks awesome. So I think I'm done. I want to leave it like this. This isn't my normal look when it comes to watercolor, so I was trying something new, and normally when I do a dog, sometimes it takes 3 or 4 hours because I'm incredibly detailed, but this was really fun. And it shows you a little bit about my process. And, you know, it's pretty cool. And so I hope you had fun watching this as much as I had fun making it. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to comment. And if you like more of these type of things, I will try to get them out. However, it is my season where I have to start focusing on Christmas cards. But if there's anything else you guys want to see, then let me know. And the other thing I was going to mention is in the next couple of videos, I'm going to be doing a ton of oil paint reviews and looking at different brands of oil paints and kind of comparing and contrasting. So that's what's coming up next. But hope you liked this. And again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comments. Thank you so much. Have a great day.